Welcome to the Calder Farmstead, your place for news, analysis, and shenanigans from the American Hockey League.
Face off one by the Condors. Jones top. Another point fence into the slot. A shot is gone! Josh Maverick in double.
Left point long drive. Save Lennox. What a stop by Matisse with the left pad. Oh, there was a scramble in front of the net. Denied was Matt Schicker by a miraculous piece of net binding by Matisse Lennox.
D-laner from the red line sends it in. Hofer in the net. He stops it. Hofer looking. Hofer firing toward the empty net. He scores! Are you kidding me? Joel Hofer, a goalie goal in the Calder Cup playoffs.
And now, with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out. Right side with Fair. Brooks Light cutting to the net. Fair and let's go! He scored! He scored! It's over!
Hello, hello, hello from Ajax, Ontario.
And Ontario, California.
Different Ontarios, but here we are. Welcome to the Calder Farmstead podcast, episode number 120 for Thursday, November 17th, 2022. If you were hoping for a podcast featuring tips on winterizing livestock barns, we're not going to be much help. This is an American Hockey League podcast. My name is Sean O'Brien from StatsTrack and the AHL's only league-wide analytics guy who now has his analytics up.
And I'm Sarah Appampato from Full Press Hockey and SB Nation's Canes Country with zero analytics.
And as always, we thank you for tuning in with us. And if you're new to hearing Sarah and I talk about hockey, we are going to talk about some news as well as dive in and discuss the goings-on of 8 teams, mostly in the Pacific Division, because, well, that's how they divide. We both watched a lot of AHL games. We're going to talk about what we see when we watch the film, as well as use some advanced stats to help us break it down. For the first time this year, we are actually going to use some fancy stats. If that's new to you, you may want to head over to our podcast feed or our YouTube channel, wherever you're listening to us from, and check out episode 0. It's a short primer on some of the stats we're going to be talking about, as well as how we view what's important on the ice. So if you're new to some of the more advanced hockey stats terms like PDO or the point shares model, or newer hockey terms like controlled zone entries, go check that out, so you better be able to pick up what we're putting down. I promise it's not that nerdy or technical. It's only 20 minutes, and let's be honest, you wasted 20 minutes hoping that Ticketmaster would suddenly function so you could go see Taylor Swift. You'll never get that time back. So next time, why not spend a little more time with us talking hockey? I mean, I guess in a sense we have league-wide news to talk about in like quotations. They are things that happened that were in the AHL. So let's breeze through them here. Artem Anisimov signs with the Phantoms. He was injured in the KHL last season, injured in Flyers training camp earlier this year on a PTO. He signs what I believe is an AHL deal here. Sarah, what make you of Artem Anisimov to the Phantoms?
I mean, this is how I learned he was still playing hockey. I had just sort of assumed, I know that he'd been dealing with injuries basically forever. The last time I heard of him in the NHL was on injured reserve. And so I just assumed that he had hung up the skates and was done and was going to go enjoy his millions of dollars not playing hockey. But here we are. He's now a Lehigh Valley Phantom. So sorry for his life, I guess.
And it's a PTO too. So
Yeah.
like he's not really making money doing this, and I mean, he's 34. It's not clear how much he has left in the tank or how well his body is going to hold up, because that's not been great. He was injured in training camp. He got injured in the KHL late last season, as you said. He's been injured quite on and off for the last few seasons of his career. I mean, I think he could be an impact player on the Phantoms if he's healthy and when he's healthy, but are we really counting on that from a dude with that injury history at that age? Not to mention too, I don't understand this from his perspective of why we're doing this now. This is really the only place that's taken you. And they're as a PTO guy, you don't get a paycheck. You get
Right.
food money and a place to live.
Yeah.
You are basically a freeloader as a hockey player. And if you're, a college kid or whatever, trying to, make it as an undrafted guy, that makes sense for you for an audition. But if you're a dude who, according to Cap Friendly's, made $36 million from contracts in his NHL career, what are we what are we doing here? Like,
Yeah.
And this makes me think that he's either super broke or like doesn't know what to do when he's done playing hockey and just never wants to get to that point where he has to figure it out, which I completely understand from a I don't have money aspect and from a I don't know what comes next aspect. But like, I don't know. This feels like a strange move from him. Like, do you really not like your wife and kids that much?
Yeah, and like
Tom Brady doesn't, but that's okay.
Right, and like, well, he's Tom Brady. Like, and I feel like, usually when you see these PTOs, sometimes it's like, it's a guy who like veteran experience, like he's a guy who you think of as a leader who just like doesn't quite have it anymore. And Artem Anisimov isn't the guy who comes to mind when I think he's worn a letter throughout, like at times throughout his career, but like he's not someone who I think of like, we'll talk about them later in the show, but Ontario, Nate Thompson is on a PTO there. Like him or not, he has been a guy who's been kind of respected throughout the room in his career and a good guidance for younger players, blah, blah, blah. Like that's not Artem Anisimov. Like, so it also adds to the, like, what is your goal here? What are you doing? Why?
I don't know. I kind of agree with that. Like, I don't think of him as being, a locker room glue guy throughout his career. I think of him as being just kind of a big, net fronty kind of guy.
Yeah.
Another player moving around the AHL, though, as we move on here, Brendan Saulnier traded to the Belleville Senators. I guess this counts as AHL news. He is technically a recent AHL player. The AHL teams made the deal. In true Belleville fashion, it involved future considerations. Another guy who's been seemingly hurt a bunch in his career and hasn't really been an impact AHL player really ever. This headline, I feel like, could have read, AHL-ish body traded to Belleville Senators for steak dinner. And we would all been like, oh, okay, that's also
true.
accurate, but sure. I mean, he's really a bottom six kind of physical presence more than anything. He's a dude who's going to drop the gloves necessarily or not, and not much else.
Yeah. He exists.
Is there any thoughts on Brendan Saulnier, or are we just...
He exists. I mean, it makes me wonder what's going on with whoever their ECHL team is, if the ECHL team needs another body. I didn't think Belleville was that hard up for people who could like put on skates and roam around.
I think Atlanta is their team. No, Atlanta went to somebody else. I don't because ECHL affiliates are made up. Like, they don't really. Everyone's like, oh yeah, we'll wear the patch on our shirt, and then like half of their call-ups are from other teams. So, like, if that were a marriage, even a Kardashian would end it by now. But it's.
Yeah.
All right. Let's shift over to team focus dives because, well, there's nothing really else to talk about from a league-wide news perspective, I guess. So let's focus in on some teams. We have 8 of them. As always, we go east to west, Atlantic to Pacific, although this episode is going to be more Pacific heavy because, well, that's all the teams that are left when we do, 2 from each division each week. One of those weeks is going to be heavy on the Pacific because someone decided that there needed to be 10 teams there, and everyone's just like, yep. That's okay.
Totally normal.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, tee us up here.
All right, so we're going to start out today with the the Bridgeport Sound Tigers. They don't get their name yet. They don't deserve it. We're going to start with Bridgeport, and we've got Ruslan Isakov, who is not someone who is on our radar to be an impact player this season, and for good reason. He had a mediocre season over in Liga. He was a point per game in the DEL in Germany, but the DEL, it's a few steps below the AHL. So, wasn't expecting much. He wasn't on the radar for having a breakout candidate season, but 14 points in 12 AHL games so far this season. He is leading the Sound Tigers in scoring. So what have you seen from him so far?
I'm still definitely not as high on him as other people are, but he's got NHL level skills in his game, and they've always been there. They've been parts that no one who has seen him play has been like, yeah, I don't see, like, he's got NHL level puck skills. He can manipulate defenders and create space at a very high level. He adds deceptive levels to his game and won't just stare down what he's going to do next with the puck, whether that's shoot, pass, deke, whatever. Like, he keeps defenders guessing, and that's an incredibly valuable skill. However, there are lots of little bits of his film that concern me for his ability to sustain this level of production with the Sound Tigers and his game's transferability to the NHL. In terms of production in the AHL, he's shooting 30.8%, 30.8. I don't think I have to explain at this point that that's not a sustainable number to continue to shoot. He has of his 10 assists, only 4 are primary assists. 1 was a primary assist on an empty net power play goal. So 3 really are assists that you could give him serious credit for transferability. The other 7, that's not really the same thing. Watching him play from a film perspective, he's not a big play driver on this team when he's been on the ice. Surprisingly, that's been Andy Andrioff. Andrei Andrioff, play driver. I know. Seeing him play the last 2 years, I'm a little bit shook by it too. But Andrioff's been the one making the zone entries, carrying the mail through the neutral zone, working possession in the offensive zone. Ishakov has not been a real big part of that, and that's okay. But you also, again, we're stacking things on top of each other that are making me ask questions. He's also not a big defensive player either. He's not a doing nothing kind of defensive player like, say, what you'll see from Chris Terry. But he's not doing much. He's not breaking up passes in the D zone. He's not really blocking shots. He's not really getting into position to block shots. He's more kind of just like, hey, this looks like I'm playing defense vaguely in the area of your shooting lane, but he doesn't actually get a body on the puck that gets shot. He's not sealing off passing lanes to the point. Like he's there. He's basically playing lip service and kind of moving his feet in the defensive zone, but he's not doing much. He also routinely pushes the pace out of the zone looking for stretch passes early. So he's, as soon as it looks like his team is going to recover that pass, he's, looking for the exit of the zone well beforehand. And that's okay, but at the same point, that will get you burned in the AHL and beyond doing stuff like that. And that's something that will not endear you to a lot of coaches should you get burned doing it repeatedly. He hasn't yet, but again, it's only been a handful. It's only been, a dozen games? Those moments are coming, and how he reacts to them and adapts to them, and how Brent Thompson does too, are going to say a lot. As far as translating to the NHL, I still think he's a ways away from becoming an everyday NHL player. I think he's probably on the short list for call-ups when the Islanders need a winger, but I think it's unlikely that he sticks the landing, as typically call-ups, to the show from the AHL don't really get top 6 minutes and are instead asked to, play 9, 10, 11 minutes a night, maybe 12 if they're lucky, doing checking line things, fourth line things, not getting scored on. And that's not his game. He's not a defensive asset. He's not particularly physical. He's not a battler down low or along the walls or at the net front. In order to become a regular NHL player, he still needs to work on playing with pace and getting his skating speed better. His offensive game needs some rounding out, as NHL level hands are by no means a complete level or a complete offensive skill set at the NHL level. He's a decent playmaker. He's not a great shooter, but those are things that he needs to work on if he's going to become an everyday NHLer. He also needs to add more value in transition because he's not doing a whole lot of it there. Yeah, he's pushing the pace out of the zone, but anyone can do that. I'd expect he gets some NHL games this year, but like I said, I'd be shocked if it was more than some cups of coffee and some yo-yos. All in all, he has talent, and he's surprised in how well he's transitioned to the North American game so far, as this is mostly his first kind of journey into it at the professional level. But there are a fair number of warning posts here that his production at the AHL level isn't sustainable, and that he still has work to do before he sticks the landing in the show.
So there's another prospect in the Islanders system who's standing out so far, and that is Samuel Bolduc. He's already eclipsed his point totals from last season. He's got 2 goals in 12 games, which is, pretty great. He had 2 goals in 57 games last year, so drastic increase there. What have you seen from him so far this season?
Kind of like Ishakov, I'm not all aboard here, but I've seen improvements. Much as I've been patient with the talented guys that we've talked about in the last couple of weeks who are off to rough starts, the Gabriel Fortiers, Zach Fucales, Jakob Peltiers, I've been pumping the brakes on guys who are off to super hot starts as well. David Gust, Brent Sini, Semyon Dargachintsev, Brent Sutter, Ruslan Ishakov. And I'm going to continue that here. in these early slates of how's this player doing, how's that player doing, I'm tending to be a little more conservative in that aspect. And I think that that's shown to be quite meritorious so far. I've seen a lot of defensive improvement from Bolduc, but again, all of that improvement I've seen is defensive. I think he's processed the game in the defensive zone better, and he's been much better at finding his check in the offensive zone, defending the net front. He's done better at defending the rush. I would not call it good, but it's an improvement from last season where he got walked quite a few times just by guys putting speed to the outside. I still think he's been bad in transition, especially under pressure in his defensive zone, breaking pucks out. He's been fine in transition when he has time and space and can kind of assess the landscape of what's going on and get his feet moving a little bit. But when it comes to just fielding dump-ins and making the correct play up the wall to one of his teammates, not great, Bob. And that's something that was plaguing him last year and plagues the team in general, and that concerns me. Offensively, 10 assists on the year, but only 5 are primary assists. And as we've said many times, secondary assists aren't very repeatable. A lot of cases, they're just you making a standard, pass to somebody else, and then they make a pretty play. Or, you make the first pass out of the zone, and that guy skates through the neutral zone and hits a 2-on-1. Like, you didn't really do much to make that play happen. So we don't think of them as being good markers of repeatable playmaking, whereas primary assists are, and only half of his are. He's also shooting 9.1% as of recording, which is at night on Wednesday, especially and 9.1% is not unsustainable for a forward, but for a defenseman, that's very high. And especially given that nearly all of his shots are from the shadow of the blue line and outside the home plate area, 9.1% is not a number that I think is sustainable for him as a shooting percentage, given where he shoots from typically. And those, shots from distance, even though he's not a bad shooter, that's not a recipe to score goals consistently at the AHL level and beyond. All in all, I think Bolduc has made some progress, but I don't think he sustains this offensive production at the rate he's at now. Clearly, he's going to have a career year in the AHL, but he's a ways away from being able to sustain a point per game pace at the AHL level, or even, a close facsimile of that. If he finishes with 0.6 points per game this year, I would say that's impressive and shows probably a lot more progress in his offensive game. But him finishing above that seems wild to me. Like, I suppose it is possible, but I would not bank on it.
Yeah, seems unlikely. The team also, I want to look at the team as a whole. They've been surprisingly strong to start the season. The numbers behind them have also been strong as well. They're a +4 in even strength goal differential. Their special teams are 3rd and 11th in net power play and penalty kill, respectively. And their estimated PDO is 100.88. The defensive environment has been above league average, and they've also gotten respectable goaltending. So do you believe that this is a team that is going places?
Not yet. All of what you just said is true. There are a lot of good signs here statistically. And yet I, the analytics dude, have paused from watching their games. They still struggle to break the puck out in a controlled fashion for basically everyone that's not named Dennis Chalowski, who's unsurprisingly been very good in transition because, well, he's like a 7th defenseman in the NHL for most teams. He should be able to do this well, and he has been. And it's also the fact that they've been struggling in transition to get break pucks out effectively is never a good sign for any team, and especially one for them because they have struggled to do that for a very long time now. It's been 3 years since Bridgeport has looked competent in transition, so the fact that this is still a problem for them concerns me. And what that amounts to is they're not able to break pucks out. It ends up turning pucks over inside your own zone, giving teams extended possessions in their D zone, which could have been avoided. And that's bad. Now, they've only played 12 games, but they only have 1 win against a team with a current winning record. That's an OT win over Providence on October 21st. They're 1-4 against teams with a winning record, and they've been collecting points against teams that are struggling early in the season. Teams like Laval, Hartford, Lehigh Valley, and Springfield. That'll balance out over the course of the season for sure, but for right now, their early schedule is a lot of teams like Springfield, Hartford, Lehigh Valley, and I think that's giving them a little inflated sense of where they are relative to the top teams in the AHL. Now, again, over the course of the season, that will balance out, and that we'll know for sure. But for right now, I think that they're in a place where they're going to still be a top 3 team in this division come like the holidays. But a lot of that has been favorable scheduling, some maybe better puck luck, and a manage to avoid problems that will eventually plague them, I think. All that being said, I don't think they're a bad team, but I need to see more to believe, especially when there are good signposts, but there are bad ones. So mixed signals, I need more. All right, from one Atlantic team to another, let us talk about the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. The Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins started out the season as one of the hotter teams in the league with 6 straight wins in October. But they looked like they've cooled off a bit. Sarah, was this a hot start or was this a mirage?
Yeah, we're going to go with Team Mirage right now. They're 6-4-1-0 right now. They're 6th in the division. So, that 6 straight wins in October. Based off of that, you can tell they haven't won since then. Similar to another team that we're going to talk about later in the show, that hot start is hiding some of their struggles. They have now lost 4 straight games, 2 to Hershey, 1 to Hartford, and 1 to Springfield. Looking back at their October when they actually played well, they lost their opening night in overtime. Game number 2 was suspended because of that whole power outage nonsense. And then they won 6 straight. But again, they haven't won since then. And that doesn't seem random. That seems a little closer to maybe what we're going to expect from the Penguins. With them, the team, they're what you see is what you get. The model didn't love them that much. We were pretty indifferent about them. And that's kind of what we're getting from them so far. Looking at, the PDO, 99.6, which feels like as close to, well, yeah, that's about what they are as you're going to get. They're pretty close to just being even. They're not allowing a ton of goals. They've got 25 against. It's the fewest in the league. So defensively, goaltending-wise, something good is happening there. They're another team that's playing in a lot of close 1-goal games, and things just lately haven't been breaking their way. So I guess if you want to look at it from an optimistic side, sure, they've gone on this losing streak, but they're still losing close games. They're not getting blown out, which is at least something that you can kind of hang your hat on for being able to improve in the future. Looking at their lineup, it's basically a who's who of guys who have played in the NHL for a hot minute, but you probably forgot about them. Drake Caggiula is there, Alex Nylander, Ty Smith, Xavier Ouellet. All those guys, they're there, they're playing. Alex Nylander in particular, he's a guy who every stop that he makes in his career, you think, maybe this is the time he's going to put it together. Maybe this is the time that he's going to be useful and consistent and not like a selfish teammate who doesn't make plays and every time you're wrong. And that's sort of where we're at with him now as well. He's been in Rochester, Rockford, and now here. And we're seeing much of the same from him in Wilkes-Barre as we have from him in other stops. He's a guy who he is what he is. With all of the experience on the team, because again, this is the Penguins who don't really have a whole ton of young prospects in the AHL who you think are going to be impact players in the NHL. Or if they're going to be impact players, they're already up with Pittsburgh because every time you blink, someone has gotten hurt. And then, Mark Donk comes up to play next to Sidney Crosby and, scores 40 goals or whatever. They haven't been super impacted yet by Pittsburgh with injuries. So you can't really even blame the NHL for taking away their top players. With all the experience on their team, with all of the veteran players, no one has above 9 points in 12 games played. I feel like most AHL teams, you're going to look, there's at least a guy who's playing at a point per game pace. They can't even get close to that. 9 points is the most anyone has on that team. They're not scoring. So while it's great that they're not allowing a ton of goals, they're not scoring, so they're not winning games. They've got 28 goals total. That puts them 29th in the league, which is about 2.55 goals per game. Compare that to the league leading Syracuse Crunch. They've got 52 goals in 14 games played, which is 3.71 goals per game. So that is a huge disparity. The veterans aren't scoring. The prospects, as few as they are, aren't scoring. No one is putting pucks in net. So maybe things would look different for Wilkes-Barre if anyone knew how to score, but they don't have that. And they can't even rely on special teams right now. They're pretty middle of the pack to bad for the Penguins. The power play is tied for 23rd. The penalty kill is 17th. And So it's not even like, oh, we're scoring goals on the man advantage. We just can't score at even strength. No, they just can't score goals. And looking at goals against, there's a lot of just dumb errors. There's a lot of turnovers at the blue line. They allow a shorthanded goal. They allowed like a 2-0 while they were shorthanded. It just not looking great. Just dumb mistakes that you would like to think that maybe as time goes by, as they get more chemistry with each other, maybe they'll do better. But I really think that what we're seeing from the Penguins is kind of who they are.
And that seems fair too. I will say Alex Nylander, I feel like is a dude who, when he wants to turn it on, he can turn it on. Like you can see like when you hear scouts rave about him and you go watch him play, there will be moments in which you will likely see, oh, I see it.
That's
now.
why.
And then you'll have some where it's just like he'll have games where he just kind of floats.
Yeah.
He's there to hang out, not to, really do much of anything. And it's frustrating to watch. Like he very much doesn't seem like he has the professional killer mentality of this is what I do for a living and take a lot of pride in it. He seems like he's just kind of there because it's fun.
Right.
And, like that's probably not true. Like I'm sure he works very hard and all of that kind of thing. You don't get to make it to this level without that. But like it doesn't seem like he has that kind of killer instinct of every game I show up and I pour my heart into that game. Whereas like you could never accuse, the greats of the NHL with that kind of mentality. Like, and I think he lacks that, at least, from the outside looking in.
Yeah. It's like I feel like you hear some players and coaches talk about like, okay, if you don't have your A game, your B game needs to be good. And it's like he has no B game. He has an A game that shows up every couple of shifts, and then the B game is just sort of controller disconnected. And that's why he's still in the AHL and hasn't made it permanently to the NHL.
I was about to say, I don't know if you ever watched the UFC way back in the day, but he reminds me a bit of Forrest Griffin in that like Forrest Griffin was someone who would have fights where he didn't seem like he cared. Like he would go out there and just kind of do his thing and that was it. And then there were some where he got pissed off or like someone hit him hard and he started bleeding and that angered him. And all of a sudden it was like a completely different dude. Like he was someone who it didn't seem like he always wanted to go in there and pour his heart out. Like he needed something else to get him going. I don't know. Anyway, that's we've done a good bit here on Wilkes-Barre Scranton. It's a good place to leave it, even though we could dive into this more. We have 6 other teams we still got to cover here.
Let's head north. I think it's north. Yeah, it's definitely north because it's in Canada. We're going to go look at Laval. Laval has been underperforming basically everywhere. Offense, defense are both under league average in terms of shots and goals. The goaltending isn't great. The special teams are underperforming. What is the easiest part of what's going wrong with Laval to fix, and how do they do it?
I mean, geez, did you not have any smaller questions for me to answer?
Yeah, it's existential,
Well, for starters, they're all situations. PDO is 96.9. Their estimated PDO is 98. Their rolling 2-week PDO has been under 100 for 3 of the 4 weeks. Its peak was 100.06. For those of you that aren't familiar with PDO, go check out our episode 0. But very quickly, PDO is a measure of puck luck. You want your number to be at 100. That is a sustainable level of puck luck. Whereas anything that's a point or 2 over or a point or 2 under is typically considered good luck or bad luck. In this case, the Laval Rocket have straight up not had good puck luck to start the season. And that's definitely been a factor for their results. But it's not the only thing. As for the things that are going wrong on the ice, I think the easiest thing is to follow the advice of Ken Hitchcock, revered coach for coming in and solving problems mid-season. And that was fix defense. Offense can figure itself out, but the defensive zone is where you put structure and time and effort into small details. So that's where we're going to start. On the defensive side of the puck, one aspect I think is likely to improve. The other I think is unlikely to improve. The one that isn't likely to improve from the defensive aspect, I think, is the penalty kill. And that's for a simple reason. Laval runs one of the most passive penalty kills in the AHL. Their 1-3-4 check does not have defensemen, trying to break up entries at the blue line. They cede ground very quickly. They're not doing a whole lot to slow down power plays flying through the neutral zone. Their version of the check press in zone is incredibly passive and doesn't feature basically any pressure on the puck carrier until they get below the dots. We said this last week and said it many times in the past, and we will say it again and say it many times in the future, I'm sure. But surrendering time and space to the opposing team in the defensive zone on the penalty kill is a bad strategy. Laval does that on the penalty kill and has for some time now. I believe I saw pretty much the same thing when Joel Bouchard was the coach of the team. So this isn't just JF Houle. This has been what Laval has trotted out as their penalty kill for a couple seasons now. Why? Excellent question. That's not one I can answer. But unless they decide that they're going to get a new assistant coach in charge of running the PK, I think that the penalty kill is unlikely to change midseason, as midseason changes in tactical philosophies with the same coach in charge are rarer than people enjoying their experience with Ticketmaster. In terms of 5-on-5 defensive play, the one big aspect that's driven Laval's success in recent years was their relentless forecheck. And it's been, by and large, pretty unremarkable this season. Laval is still a fast team, but they haven't been able to weaponize that speed on the forecheck and in the neutral zone. And I think that's very clearly hurt them. And that's been a staple of their success the last 2 seasons, regardless of whether it was Joel Bouchard or JF Houle at the helm. They've also struggled in transition. Now, what does that have to do with defense? Well, when you make turnovers in the neutral zone or are going, glassing out basically to just punt possession into the neutral zone for the other side to regroup, you have to play a lot more defense. Laval wasn't necessarily great at this last season, but again, they were able to better weaponize their speed so they could either recover those glassing out plays more consistently by having wingers be able to speed through the neutral zone and battle for those pucks, or by forechecking those opportunities more effectively. They aren't doing either of those, and it's impacting their own end. Look no further than the goal Ronnie Attard scored on Saturday in Lehigh Valley. In the zone, the Laval Rocket play a man-to-man scheme when the puck is high in the zone. It looks a little bit like this. This is a shot from the first period against Lehigh Valley from this past weekend. As you can see, the puck is at the top of the circles here, and it's pretty clearly man-on-man. If you go back and watch this specific play, you'll see that these 2 players that are over here on the left actually follow their checks across the play, across the grain of the play. That's a dead giveaway that they're just following their mark and not really playing a zone or anything more specific than that. Again, playing man-to-man when the puck is high in the zone is a very common defensive scheme. You'll see it across most teams in the AHL. When the puck is below the dots, the Laval Rocket play what is called a 5-tight. What that means is you have a forward, typically the center, and a defenseman pressuring the puck carrier who's below the face-off circles. They're trying to basically create a 2-on-1 down low, which will help them regain possession. The weak side defenseman who's away from the puck, he guards the net front there. Your 2 wingers come down to the top of the circles. The puck side winger, his job is to cut off passes from high to low, as well as some different variations of this. His job is to also defend the dot lane there. The weak side winger defends the high slot, makes sure passes don't get to that defenseman or into the high slot there. This is called a 5-tight, and by and large, most teams play some form of this coverage. If you listen to last week's episode, this should look familiar to you, as it's basically the same system the Syracuse Crunch play. A lot of AHL and NHL teams, I'm sure some CHL teams play this, some variation or exactly this in their defensive zone. Also, as we said last time, man-to-man coverage gets broken down really easily if one dude breaks past his check. If one guy breaks past his check with the puck and he's the puck carrier, Godspeed to the rest of the defense, because they're now basically playing a 4-on-5 and have to kind of figure out, okay, do I leave my check, my man, to go attack and pressure the puck carrier? Because that clearly is going to leave my dude open then. And we've seen examples of this with Laval already. If you look at Hendrix Lapierre's goal from Sunday in Hershey, he beats his man in the corner with the puck and then starts rolling up high, where you see the coverage shift from being a 5-tight to that man-to-man. But Lapierre's already beaten his man, who's supposed to be responsible for him, and he just kind of walks into the slot and scores untouched. The other problem that Laval seems to be having is they haven't really done a very good job executing that 5-tight very well. a lot of times it seems like that second wave of puck carrier pressure, whether that's the puck side defenseman or the center or a different forward who's making, an interchange with the center because he's the closest man to the puck, they're late to that party. And what should be a 2-on-1 situation for the defense and an outnumbering one that you're trying to create through playing this scheme, is now just a 1-on-1 board battle or 1-on-1 down low in tight. And Laval have been losing those battles by and large because that pressure, that additional pressure, isn't showing up on time or is late to the party or completely absent. And that's why you've seen these extended cycles down low against the Rocket, because they aren't executing it. They aren't executing their strategy in time to create those 2-on-1s. They aren't winning those subsequent board battles, those, low zone kind of small area games, if you will. That means longer possessions for the opposing offense. And that's always going to have bad defensive results. And that's what we're seeing from Laval. Like, that defense is not doing something tactically that's weird. They're just not executing on the tactics they've been doing. They're not winning 1-on-1 battles. And they're, by and large, just not doing small habits right. They're playing very lethargic as well. Like, they're not weaponizing speed. And that's why we see Laval just struggling in their own zone and struggling on defense. I think the 5-on-5 aspects will get better. I think that's something that gets improved with time and with coaching. It's a little late in the year to still be having these defensive lapses, but it's not unheard of. And they're also, not eliminated from the playoff contention already. It's still just November. But I think the penalty kill, for reasons we already talked about, is unlikely to get better. Everything else is a conversation for another time. We have to leave it there, as we have other teams to cover in our league-wide podcast. But let us shift over to the Western Conference, to the Central Division. We're taking things a little weird this time because there are more teams in the Pacific Division, and the math has got to get made up somewhere. So let's head over to Iowa and talk about the Iowa Wild. The Wild made news this past week, not necessarily for their play or for doing anything particularly good, but mostly because of a goal from a pretty unlikely source. Sarah, what's happening with the Wild recently?
Well, Jesper Wallstedt heard that we were bored with the Iowa Wild, and he said, I'm going to do something cool, and then he scored a goal. If you do not know who he is, he's their goaltender. You don't see that very often. I believe I was at the game. It happened in Chicago. I believe it is my first goalie goal that wasn't scored by Mike Smith at an All-Star game. So, that was fun. It was fun. They beat the Wolves, but, whatever. More importantly than the goalie goal, which we'll talk about in a second, though, he picked up his first AHL win. He had 3 overtime losses prior to that, so really just luck breaking not his way in his previous AHL games. He's a first-round pick from 2021, widely viewed as the goalie of the future for the Minnesota Wild. And so good to see him get that first win. In watching him, you can see why he is so highly touted as a prospect. And he scored a goal, so that's pretty cool. Michael Russo from The Athletic did a really great interview podcast thing with him and pointed out that it was 2 days before Wallsted's 20th birthday and almost 5 years to the day after he scored a goal in youth leagues in Sweden. So he's done it before. He just chose to do it over here. It is also the first goalie goal in Wild organization history. If you follow Marc-Andre Fleury and his lifelong desire to get a goal, sorry, dude, but you got beat by Jesper Wallstedt. As a player, he's a guy who takes a lot of responsibility for his performance, even if he's let down by the team in front of him, with the Iowa Wild is kind of a regular occurrence. But he is a guy who has really high expectations for himself. And he knows where he sits in like the hierarchy of the Wild. He knows the value of the fact that he is a first round draft pick. He knows that, and I think is approaching it. When I saw that he was just 20 years old, I was like, this kid has a good head on his shoulders in terms of understanding the development of a prospect, understanding the road that it takes to get to be an NHL goalie. He knows the development is going to be slow. He's not already pushing for an NHL spot. He's got a really good attitude about yes, I'm going to spend time in the AHL. I want to hone my game and be the best that I can before I go to the next step. So if you're a Wild fan, either Iowa or Minnesota, you have a good goaltender on your hands who knows the path that it's going to take and who isn't sitting here being like, well, why aren't I in the NHL? Zane McIntyre just got called up to the NHL because of an injury to Marc-Andre Fleury. So it looks like it's going to be Wallsted's net for a while in Iowa. So it's going to be a really good opportunity for him to get regular games in and to really kind of show what he can do, to show why he was that first round pick. But that goal that he scored, end of the game, empty net for Chicago. It's a 4-3 game at that point, or 4-2 game at that point. They're on a power play, so Chicago pulls their goalie, and you can't ice the puck as the Wild, and so he sees it. The puck literally goes right directly to him, and he looks down the ice and he just lofts it the whole way down the ice. Perfect shot. Like, it wasn't even one of those goalie goals where it like bangs in off of someone else or, an own goal. No, it was delightful. If you're into that sort of thing, it was a delight, and really much more interesting than like literally anything else the Iowa Wild have done. I'm sorry to Iowa, but just not. It's not thrilling hockey. In that game that he scored that in, it was also the first game in at least 4 games that the Wolves had outshot their opponent, and they still lost. Is that a reflection on Iowa or on Chicago? Really both. Wallstead did have a fantastic performance in net. I don't want to take anything away from him in that game. But, Iowa easily let Chicago into the zone. 39 shots is a season high for the Wolves, who have been kind of meh this year so far. If you look at the heat map thing, there's a large cluster of shots basically right in front of Wallstead. So they're not doing a whole ton to protect him. So it's not shocking that it's taken him this long to get his first win, and that he's, if you just look at it, you might think he's struggling. But if you watch him, it's because the team in front of him is really not helping him out. So they have a good goaltender, at least. And I think the rest of the team will eventually, maybe, shape itself into something that is going to be a little more competitive. But they just don't play interesting hockey. The Wild have always had an emphasis on physicality more than speed or skill. The handful of more exciting prospects that they get end up in the NHL sooner rather than later. And so you're left with sort of those grinder guys. And they can do it. They can grind out a win. They're doing it right now. But it just doesn't make for the most fun game to watch. Their opponents are doing interesting things, which is bad for the Wild. See also the 39 shots against from the Wolves. That's kind of a trend with the Wild. But they've won 3 straight, 4 of their last 5. 3 of their total losses this season, they're 5-3-1-2. 3 losses came in overtime or in the shootout. So as much as I want to roll my eyes at the Iowa Wild and how consistently not excited I am to see them come to town, which is 12 times a year in Chicago, something right now is working right for them. We talked about PDO earlier. They're all situations. PDO is 101.6. So they're definitely overperforming. They're getting that good luck right now. I don't expect the hot streak to last, but if you're an Iowa Wild fan, this is a fun time to tune in because they're doing something right. And with McIntyre up in the NHL, Fleury is on injured reserve, so it's not just a quick day-to-day sort of thing. You're going to get to see more of Jesper Wallstead. So I think that alone is a reason to tune in, but just know that eventually the luck is going to go back to where it should be.
I also think, too, with Iowa, they're sending a lot of guys to Minnesota right now because when you buy out those contracts and you have, $14 million in dead cap hits and a $9 million player on your roster, you need anybody who's even semi-competent on an entry-level contract on the Minnesota side of this. So, if Iowa even gets, a prospect or a player that's, looking good or performing well or could even be semi-useful in Minnesota, Bill Guerin's going to snap that dude up because they are in a cap situation that is something. It's hard to say that it was a smart choice. It's hard to say that it was a stupid choice, but it was certainly a deliberate choice. And they are, having to deal with the consequences of those actions right now because that dead cap hit that is, a Connor McDavid cap hit plus, I think, $2 million and have nothing to show for it other than
Yeah.
Zach Parise in another uniform and Ryan Suter in another uniform is
rough.
something. But if it was as bad as, it was proclaimed to be behind the scenes, then maybe it was worth it. But I think Iowa is going to be a team that is going to have to, play ugly and grind out wins. And I also think some of that is Tim Army. Like, even when that team had high-flying talent with Sam Annis and Jerry Mayhew and Kyle Rao, like, they still had those, like, greasy grind elements to them. And I don't think, like, personally, that's not my style of play. You can make it work, but I think it's not one that's going to endear itself to a lot of fans. I think fans like offense and scoring and not, 60 minutes of board battles around the ice. But, that's just me. But I think Tim Army's always going to have that part to his teams no matter what, because that's the way he likes to coach. But I agree. If you're an Iowa Wild fan right now, like, things are going well. And I don't think that those are going to sustain. And I think you guys are clearly the worst team in that division. But hey, when times are good, enjoy them. And that's really all there is to it.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to head to break. After the break, we will get to the Pacific Division. Bakersfield, Abbotsford, Tucson, and Ontario. Her Ontario, not my Ontario.
Yeah.
I know the difference between the Ontarios, Reddit. If you're just here for Bridgeport, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Laval, or Iowa, and this is your jumping off point, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or this video from, so you get episodes in a timely fashion. You don't want to listen to this in 3 weeks when it's not really that relevant anymore. Also, check us out on social media. Links to our social media and more can be found on our Linktree page at linktr.ee/thecalderfarmstead. We're going to run some ads, pay some bills. We will be right back. Stay tuned. And we're back from break, and we are out on the West Coast, the best coast. And to be honest, the entire Pacific Division is kind of a mixed bag. Bakersfield is 7-5, but second in the Pacific Division, which feels kind of odd. One game above 500, but second in the division. Sarah, what have you seen from Bakersfield to make sense of that?
So I think one of the important things to look at first for Bakersfield is their goaltending, because they have been relying a ton on it. And I'm going to look at their two most recent games. They played against San Diego recently, and then they played in a back-to-back against Ontario. In their game against the Gulls, they really execute a trap game pretty much the entire game, which puts a lot of the pressure back on their goaltending whenever things go wrong. That is who they have to rely on. So they have Calvin Pickard and Olivier Rodrigue, and both of those guys have been really carrying a lot of weight for the Bakersfield Condors. Pickard in particular is playing pretty well right now. We're seeing overall solid performances from him. He's been around for, I feel like, ages at this point. I looked him up earlier and was a little stunned to realize exactly how long he's played and how many different teams he has played for. It feels like all of them at this point. So if you've seen him in any of his stops before, you know what you're getting. You're getting a pretty solid goaltender, a guy who could maybe be, a backup in the NHL, or at least as a reliable number 3 to call up and shove into a game, particularly if you're like, I don't know, Detroit or something, that you're not going to win any. Like, you just need a body is what you need. So I think he's been fine at this level. But the Gulls the Condors have been helping him out a lot too. They're not allowing a whole ton of shots from up close. And it helped that they were playing the Gulls, who have been pretty easy to push off to the perimeter this season so far. And so Bakersfield didn't have a whole ton of work to do to really protect their goaltender in that game. They also have been doing a really good job at clogging up shooting lanes. In that game, and the same thing happened in the game against Ontario as well. Their strategy lately has been they score a goal, and then suddenly there's a ton of energy, a ton of momentum, and then they score another goal really quickly. They basically just swarm. And it's working for them. In the game against San Diego, their first goal came because they picked off a pass from the Gulls. The Gulls had full control. There was no reason this should have turned into a goal against. Basically, a Gulls player throws the puck up center ice, and it gets picked off by the Condors. Guess what happens? You go the other way. They have been doing really good at capitalizing on the other team's mistakes. The next goal, which came a couple of shifts later, all of the Gulls basically chase the puck. 3 guys all go to the puck carrier, leaving the goal scorer unattended, basically in front of the net. Of course, that's going to result in a goal against. If there's one thing I learned from my very bad beer league hockey career, it's if you look in a direction and you see too many people wearing your same jersey in that spot, don't go there. I don't need you. You don't need to be there. And that's exactly what the Gulls did. They all just followed the puck. And so the Condors have been really good at finding those mistakes and exploiting them, which a lot of other teams haven't necessarily been able to do. The game against Ontario the next day, so it's a back-to-back, it was a pretty low-energy game from both of them. It took at least 10 minutes, I think more, for the Reign to even get a shot on goal. So not great, great for the Condors, but it wasn't even particularly the Condors are doing a really great job of keeping the puck from them. It was just a lot of back and forth with no real shots coming off. And Ontario also played down to the energy of Bakersfield. And so it was just a slow start. And in this game, it was another example of taking advantage of a struggling opponent and capitalizing on their mistakes. The goals that they scored against came off of turnovers, defensive mistakes from the other team. And in this one, they scored 2 goals on consecutive shots. So again, that same mentality of we score a goal and that gets us amped up and we come out the next shift and then ta-da, another goal, which I think at least speaks a lot to the psychology, the mental skills, fortitude, whatever you want to call it, of the team to be able to continue that momentum from shift to shift. If you look at them, and this is one of those ones where I feel like the eye test and the stats test would be interesting to kind of mesh. If you look at them, they're not necessarily playing well. There's not a whole lot that you watch and you're like, oh, that was a really flashy play. That was really smart. They're just doing really good jobs at making, like I said, making the opponent pay for mistakes that they make. They've been playing well enough to win, which, like we said, now has them second in the division. So this is a team that if they do start firing on all cylinders, they could actually be sort of scary, which feels weird to say about the Bakersfield Condors. They're a team that has tended to start slow. They've had to overcome that a lot. The not quite ready from puck drop. They've really been tightening up on defense until everything starts to click offensively. So the beginning of the games are kind of slogs while they wait for everyone to sort of get up to speed. And they have the personnel to do that. So there's a lot of carryover from last year on the blue line. Kesselring, Desharnais, Broberg, Caldius, all guys who were there last year played together. So there's a lot of chemistry there between their defensemen. So they can sort of do that where they rely on them to keep things in check until everyone sort of gets together. They also have Jason Demers there. I think may still be on a PTO, maybe signed a full contract, but he's been surprisingly good for the team. We talked kind of at the beginning of the show about Artem Anisimov, and you're like, why is this guy here? Demers is looking good for the Condors, and is a guy who, like him or not, has been sort of filling that role of veteran experience, good mentor for the young guys. And so he's been providing a lot for the Condors that maybe I don't think anyone expected from him. They are a team that they get a lead and then they sort of take their foot off the gas, which is something that can come back to burn them in the future if they don't, if things start breaking the wrong way for them. They rely a lot on their goaltending and their defense to sort of get them through the end games. So it's working for now, but they're not running up the score when they could be doing it. So this feels like a situation where someday they're going to get like a 4-0 lead and then blow it and then have to kind of reevaluate how they play with those leads. So it's been a surprising season for the Condors. They're looking a lot better than I think a lot of people thought that they would have, but there's some signs there that maybe they're going to want to tighten things up as the season goes along.
I think, too, there's good and bad news for the Condors coming, on the injury fronts here. According to Cap Friendly, Evander Kane's injury to his wrist, that cut, is expected to be 4 months of injury. That means somebody's going to stay up there for a while. I have to imagine at some point Tyler Benson's knee gets better. He's been listed as week to week since early October. It's the middle of November now. I have to imagine at some point he's going to make a comeback. And even if he goes straight to Edmonton, he's probably going to get like a conditioning stint in Bakersfield at the minimum. And then when he goes to Edmonton, that means someone comes back. So there should at least be some positives coming, despite the fact that they just called up Matthias Janmark and Klim Kostin on an emergency basis. But I think there's at least some good news on that, the injury front on the way for Bakersfield. If not, us getting scooped tomorrow morning that Tyler Benson comes off the IR, because that's how it always works every time, 100% of the time.
We'll just say we predicted it. That's all right.
Exactly.
You heard it here. You heard it here first. He's going to get better eventually.
That's usually how people's health works. Either that or usually it goes the other way. But
yes.
Yeah. All right. So there's much more we could talk about with Bakersfield, but I think that's a good place to leave it. Let us move on to North. We didn't do these in a very good like geographical order, but that's okay.
No, this is a terrible flight plan, but whatever. We're headed north, right? No, it's more like frontier level, I think, at this point. We're gonna go to Abbotsford. Which, does Abbotsford have an airport? I think they should.
Vancouver does. So yeah. I mean,
close enough. It's not Winnipeg. The Abbotsford Canucks, they are currently 5-5 this season, and they've just flip-flopped wins and losses each time. The model likes this team now that it's boosted its roster with guys like Cal Rao, Lane Peterson. So what is keeping them from consistently winning so far?
Oh, they for sure have the worst combination you can have. A defense that is prone to some blown coverages and goaltending that just seems unable to make saves when those moments happen. This really feels like it's been the majority of the goals against. The defense blows a coverage, whether it's 5-on-5 or on the penalty kill, and Seelovs or Delia just cannot find a save in those moments. Like, those are when, you want your goalies to stop every puck, but like, those are the moments where it seems like they need a save. Like, they don't need every save, but they need the ones where they're blowing a bad coverage in a key moment. Some examples. Tie game in the second period against Henderson. Linus Karlsson can't defend Miramanov on a 2-on-2 rush. Seelovs just can't make the save. That was a big moment that, a blown coverage on a rush chance 2-on-2, you can't get across. Then Jet Wu blows a coverage on the penalty kill, and Gage Quinney tucks one in past Seelovs. Abbotsford loses 3-2 on two blown coverages where they couldn't get a save. Down a goal in the closing seconds of the second period on the penalty kill. Will Lockwood blows a coverage, and Seelovs can't make the save. Abbotsford loses 3-1. Up a goal to start the third period. Canuck Leipert blows a coverage in the neutral zone on the PK. Seelovs can't make the save on Grimaldi's breakaway. Abbotsford loses 3-2 in the shootouts. Granted, all of these saves we're talking about here, high danger chances, and pretty much anytime there's a scoring chance or a shot on goal from a blown coverage, it's almost always going to be high danger. So it's not like I'm saying, man, why are they letting in all of these, shots from the neutral zone going? I understand these are the highest danger shots that pretty much exist in hockey. But at the same point, like, they also just come in moments where it's like, if it's already, 4-1, 5-1 in the third period, yeah, then who cares? They score that goal. But like, it seems like they cannot buy saves at critical junctures where it's like that one save probably changes the outcome of the game, or it keeps them from rallying in a game or something like that. Like, that seems to be those moments. Like, if we had a measure of high danger save percentage in the AHL, which we do not, but if we did, I would have to imagine Abbotsford would have to be near the lowest in the AHL. And I don't think that's necessarily a reflection of who their goaltending tandem is. I think both Seelovs and Colin Delia should be at least respectable AHL starters, maybe not, in awards conversations or even just outside awards conversations, but at least should be giving you somewhere in the neighborhood of league average goaltending. And I think as of recording, their combined save percentage is like .896. Yeah, it's not great. And a lot of it feels like it's just every time they have one of those moments, they can't find the puck. Or like they find it for a half second. And then the next, there was one the other day where Jermaine Lowen, beats one of the Canucks defensemen on a 2-on-2, gets on a breakaway. Seelovs makes the save, but he gets the rebound right back and shoots it from a dead angle that banks off Seelovs and goes in. So it's like, technically, yes, he made that save. They got the save, but then immediately, those are the moments that just feel like they're what separate Abbotsford from winning consistency. I still think this is a good team, but they they need to either fix the blown coverages on defense, or they need to get saves in those moments. Like that's not even to mention how bad the penalty kill has been, which is to say it's been bad, but it's been fixably bad. A lot of the goals they're giving up look like ones based on, again, blown coverages and mistakes, as opposed to something more fundamentally wrong with, like, say, what Laval's penalty kill looks like, where it's like, that's never going to get better. It's going to be bad the whole time. Whereas I don't think that's Abbotsford's penalty kill. It's a lot of guys that just don't seem like they've quite figured out where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to pressure, what lane is theirs quite yet.
Yeah, so it's a work in progress, much like one of their long-term prospects, Danila Klimovich. He is a player who has never managed to crack the top 6 in Abbotsford. He was healthy scratched again for the second time this season recently. He has 3 points in 8 games, but what is going on with him?
Klimovich was always going to be one of the longest term projects that you could draft. He's got a ton of raw talent. He's added some really nice deceptive elements to his game. He's a high-quality sniper and knows how to look off defenders, look off goalies with the puck on his stick, so he's not showing you what his next move is going to be. He's got good puck skills, but he doesn't seem to understand when and where to utilize them. I will openly admit right now, I have never watched Belarus's second professional league, as in like what the AHL version looks like in Belarus. Never watched it. I don't imagine there's even a way I could watch it from the United States or from Canada, which is where I definitely am right now. But I'm going to just guess that the caliber of play in Belarus's second league isn't very high, and there isn't a lot of structure that you would see to a North American game. And I'm only guessing this because that's where Klimovich came from, directly from Belarus's basically second league, straight to the AHL after he was drafted. And if that's the case, where in that league you don't see a lot of structure, a lot of like systems play that you would in North America, Klimovich's game makes a lot of sense because that's what he lacks a lot of the time. It's understanding the structure of how hockey is played in North America that a lot of other players just have ingrained to them since the time they were, 15, 16 or whatever. And it doesn't seem like he has that. You see him crowding teammates on breakouts or in the offensive zone where he's right on top of his line mate for absolutely no reason. And you don't see other players make those mistakes because they've been in the same, systems or similar ones for a long time. They just kind of know where they're supposed to be on the ice when the puck is a certain place or when this is about to happen. And he makes a lot of just odd decisions in the offensive zone on cycles where he puts the puck into places that no one is. And there was no reason to expect someone to be there given the play. Or he'll try and deke through guys 1-on-3 instead of dumping and changing. And his line mates are 3/4 of the way to the bench and he turns it over trying to go 1-on-3. And suddenly there's, a 2-on-1 or a 2-on-0 or whatever going the other way because he didn't just dump the puck in. Again, something that like his teammates and stuff know because they understand dump and change, or, even if you want to curl back and like pass to a defenseman and keep possession and not do that. But like you can't go 1-on-3 in those moments when everyone else is leaving the ice and make turnovers like that. And he does it often. And that just plagues the defensive side of his game too. It's not a lack of hustle or effort because he has tons of that. He just doesn't look like he understands the structure. And when one guy blows a coverage in the defensive zone, it's literally been the theme of our talk here on Abbotsford, bad things happen. And I think the other thing too to consider is he's 19, 5,000 miles away from home. And I'm just going to take a shot in the dark that his English, one of the hardest languages to learn as an adult, isn't that great. So Jeremy Colleton is probably struggling to communicate with him what exactly he's supposed to be doing. And the roster also doesn't seem to have a natural translator for him should he speak Belarusian or Russian. Silovs is Latvian, Carlson is Swedish. Every other dude on that roster is from North America. And I'd be surprised if the Latvian or Swede spoke Russian or Belarusian. All that being said, there are still things to like about Klimovich's game, but I think this is one of the rare times in which I think he'd be better served developing outside the AHL. Maybe back in Europe in a league like the KHL or the DEL, where it's at least close to his home country, where he probably would have, some familiarity, be able to see family, have less of a language barrier, but it's not, Belarus's second league. He would have to, grind his way up through a higher caliber professional league, but it would be easier for him to transition. Or he could go to the CHL where he would be, a 19-year-old and just physically bigger and stronger than a lot of the other players. If I remember correctly, the QMJHL team that has his draft rights is the Huskies, and they also have another Belarusian player on the roster. So I think it might be better for him to go there or back to Europe or something. But right now, I think what they're doing with him in the AHL, given the deficits in his game and what is likely a very large language barrier, is not working for him. And it explains why we still see a lot of just weird moves and odd timing and odd positioning in his game. And it's not getting fixed that rapidly. All right, let us move on and let us go to the desert.
We're going to look at Tucson, the Tucson Roadrunners, where Michael Carcone has 4 goals, 10 assists in just 10 games. That is not usually a stat line that you would associate with him, as he's been a shoot-first sniper and pretty much a one-trick pony in that aspect throughout his career. So is he making more progress in his playmaking, or is this also all a mirage?
Well, he's leading the team in shots on goal. He's 12th in the AHL in shots on goal. Second place on Tucson has 10 fewer shots on goal through, 12 games? 10 games. So that shoot-first mentality is still present and accounted for. In terms of making progress as a more multifaceted offensive player, adding better playmaking skills, I would be hard-pressed to agree. Of his 10 assists, you could argue that maybe 1 or 2 were deft playmaking setups. But in reality, none of them are clear, quote-unquote, playmaker dishes, like you'd see Sam Annis or TJ Tynan, or, to give it a more relatable example to Tucson fans out there, Matthias Michelli. Those were guys who had more of that kind of deft playmaking touch where they could weave a puck through traffic. And that's not to say that Michael Carcone can't do that. It's just more, that's not his game. A lot of the assists that he has made so far this season have been pretty standard passes to open guys who made an obvious play. Both assists to J.S. Day against the Barracuda, for example. Or he's had assists that looked like they were good bounces and not necessarily to intended players in the slot or intended teammates in the slot, but more of, I should put the puck to the slot because, well, why not? I would say the assist to Cracknell against Coachella Valley in like the opening 10 seconds of the game fits that description. It looked kind of like a blind shovel pass almost to the slot. Or the assist to Day against Henderson, for example. Like both of those just kind of throwing a puck to the place where I think my teammate should be, and he happens to be there and it goes in. Like, that's good. That's not to say that he shouldn't do that, but like that's not what you think of when you think of someone developing playmaking as to better round out their game. Again, I don't think that means he's not capable of it or that he won't grow that in the future, but it's not a big component of his game in the past, and I would not say that's what's driving the 10 assists in 10 games right now. He's still a pure shooter in that kind of Ovi mold where he sets up on a faceoff dot on the power play and just waits to rocket one-timers in the net. 3 of his 4 goals, I believe, look exactly like what you would see just on the other faceoff dot from Ovechkin. He's a right dot guy as a left shooter, and he just kind of sits there, waits for the puck, and then just, looks to, put it through the glass behind the net. That's Michael Carcone's game, and while we'll check in again later with him in the season and see if that's changed at all, if he has added more elements, but it's pretty much who he is at this point, and shooting talent is the rarest thing in hockey. So when you got it, you will always have a job.
Yeah, it's working for him so far. Overall, though, we weren't super high on Tucson in the preseason, and they've had mixed results this season so far. This sort of feels like a familiar story for a lot of teams. They stormed out to the gate to a 6-1 record. They've now lost 4 in a row. They're 6-4 and 5th in the Pacific Division. So what do you make of the Tucson team as a whole?
Well, when teams tend to underperform expectations, I think the first mark is always to look at puck luck and see what's going on there. I think that's an important first step. In all situations, Tucson is running a PDO of a 102.1 in Estimated PDO is 104.8. Again, if you are unfamiliar with that term PDO, please go watch our episode 0. It's all the way at the bottom of the feed, but I promise you it's there. Quickly, though, PDO is a measure of puck luck. You want your PDO to be at an even 100. Anything that's about a point or two above 100 is good luck and unsustainable. Point or two below 100 is bad luck and unsustainable, but in a more friendly way. That being said, also looking at their roster, Laurent Dauphin, a career 11% shooter, is shooting 16.1%. That's a little bit on the high side. JS Day, a career 14% shooter, is shooting 20%. That's definitely unsustainable and it's going to come down. Milos Kelemen is shooting 13.6%, and looking at his resume, as this is his first year in the AHL, that number feels a little bit high. Their special teams are also not getting the job done, despite being slightly above average in power play attempts and time shorthanded. So they're getting a good penalty differential, but they're not getting the results there that they need. They've also had a favorable schedule so far this season. They've played a lot of other teams that have struggled out of the gate. Henderson, San Jose, Calgary, although Henderson certainly didn't struggle on Tuesday night. Jeez. All of this to me says that this team had good luck to be 6-1 out of the gates, but is likely a more middling team in a division full of middling teams this year. The model has them most likely to finish 7th in the Pacific Division and grab that last playoff spot. That feels maybe not quite where I would put them, but in that neighborhood. I think they're still a playoff team, but a playoff team that if they want to be more than 7th or 6th, they're going to need to do something to separate themselves from the kind of pack of mediocrity that is 9/10 of the Pacific Division on its face right now.
Yeah, it's a weird division this year, and there's so many of them.
Oh, it is. And it's like, I feel like because it's a 10-team division, like if you pulled 7 of them randomly, somewhere out of there, one of them would look better just because it got to beat up on the other 7 crappy ones or 7 kind of middling ones. But every team in this division feels like it's got good parts and then it's got bad parts, and they're all different. So like it's kind of a rock, paper, scissors around most of the division, whereas like Coachella Valley can just kind of see itself out of the conversation.
Yeah. No.
All right, let's continue on this Pacific Division trip. Ontario is northwest of Tucson. That sounds right. That's where we're going. We're going to the other Ontario.
Yeah.
So the Ontario Reign were one of the top teams in the Pacific last season and have brought back mostly the same roster. And while they started the season out in dominant fashion, including an 8-2 opening night win over Abbotsford, things have kind of started to go downhill from there. What are the major reasons behind the Reign's slide down the standings here?
So yeah, they are yet another team that has started off really hot. At one point, they were like 7-1, I think, top in the division, and now they've lost 4 in a row. They've lost to Colorado, San Jose, Bakersfield, and San Diego. So we talk about a weird division. They're not losing to like the best teams in the division either. So it's kind of rough. They were first in the Pacific. They've dropped to third right now. And things still look just kind of rough. Last season's league best power play, like not only league best, but like historically league best, is dropping fast. Right now they're 20th in the league at 18.4%, which is really just unlike the Reign, particularly the way they've been coached the past couple of seasons. One of the big things that, I hesitate to say that it's a problem because it's like, if you're in the AHL, this is the way your life goes. Your lineup is going to change and you have no say over it. They have gotten back a lot of players. Quentin Byfield is there kind of on an unofficial conditioning loan. Alex Turcotte is just back from a long-term concussion injury. Martin Chromiak is back. They sent Brant Clark there for a totally fake conditioning assignment. They've lost guys like Elias Anderson, Jacob Moverare are both up in the NHL, just sort of hanging out as healthy scratches. So there's been a lot of change in terms of who is out there on the ice. But at the end of the day, that's the AHL, and you should be able to deal with that. They have been blown blowing leads, which I think is really the biggest concerning thing for them. They're kind of doing the thing where you see with bad teams where they're really good for like 2 periods, and then the wheels fall off in the final 20 because they're all just gassed at that point. And that really seems like a lot of what we're seeing from them. If they're not blowing leads, they're starting slow. We talked earlier about, a game against Bakersfield where they just took forever to get a shot on goal. Same thing in a game against San Diego. They just, you're looking at the clock and you're like, that still says 0 shots on goal. Great. And that has been a lot of what we've been seeing from them. They're just not ready for puck drop. And then when they do get ready, then they're behind already. And so that's been a real struggle for them. And, I feel like it's too good.
No, sorry. I thought you were done.
So I think, it's too early to say entirely, but it is interesting in that they're playing largely the same roster as last year. Martin Frk is gone. Sutter is gone to Calgary. Jared Anderson-Dolan has been up with the NHL. Some other kind of bit players in and out. But it's mostly the same guys. And you have largely the same players. But the biggest difference is you have a new coach now. And Kings fans have been frustrated with Marco Sturm as a coach for years as the assistant coach and weren't particularly impressed with what he had been doing with the power play. And the hope was, as a head coach, that maybe he'd be a little bit more back in his element of sort of overseeing the team as a whole and not having to focus particularly on one special team or the other. I'm not ready to say, this is all Marco Sturm's fault and whatever, but it is curious that we're running back largely the players, and the one thing that has changed is the head coach. So it's food for thought for like later in the season if Ontario is still struggling. Looking at their lineup, again, just a lot of changes, and some of these players are just underperforming in ways that you really don't want them to see. Brant Clark is a special case. So he's 19 years old. He's been with the Kings, and they're basically right at the point where they have to decide if they want to keep him in the NHL or if they want to send him back to the OHL. He's been a healthy scratch in the NHL for the past couple of games. No illness to speak of, no injury to speak of, and they have sent him on a conditioning assignment to the AHL to play for a little bit. So, that's a great loophole. Maybe he has a secret illness that no one knows about, but no, they sent him to the AHL because they could. So he played in a game. He got a lot of minutes. The coach put a lot of trust in him. Obviously, the Kings want to see what they have in this player before they decide if they want to keep him up or send him back to juniors. He skates fine, but his decision-making a little bit slow sometimes. And he got caught kind of flat-footed a few times. There were plays where you feel like had he been moving his feet and not just sort of standing, you would have had a different outcome, maybe not got scored on. So, I can't fault him too much. He's 19. This is his first pro hockey. I expect him to make mistakes, but the guys that I don't expect to make mistakes are the guys who have been around for a while. Another player that was just sent down on a fake conditioning assignment, because they're not going to call it that, but because they can just send him there, is Quentin Byfield. So he's coming off of an illness, not COVID, but it kept him out for quite some time. And so they sort of sent him down to the AHL to let him get some games in. And he's just looked a step behind. I don't know what the illness is, but he just doesn't seem to quite have it all back together yet. Doesn't seem to be totally ready to be playing. He looked okay in the NHL. He's also still young. And so I think that anyone pushing the panic button on Quentin Byfield needs to slow their roll a little bit. But, it's a little concerning to see some of the mistakes that he's making. And for right now, I'm chalking it up to just sort of that long layoff because of his illness and just sort of getting the hands and the body and the mind all sort of on the same page. But something also to keep an eye on there. With Rasmus Kupari is up in the NHL instead. He's doing fine. So I think for right now, it's probably better to have Quentin Byfield in the AHL, let him work out all of those mistakes and errors in the AHL where, whatever happens, and he can get big minutes there instead of having to play 6 minutes for Todd McClellan in the NHL. But again, a player that a lot of Kings fans and Reign fans have a lot of hope for. Obviously a very high pick, but is still just sort of struggling to put it all together. But, is super young as well. Alex Turcotte is a guy that is back, and honestly, I'm just glad to have him playing. Concussions have sort of derailed his career. Concussions, injuries. He had mono at one point. I think he had like an appendix thing. Just every time you blink, something new and different is wrong with him. But coming back from a pretty bad concussion that he suffered in the playoffs last season, it's been a long journey back for him. And so just seeing him back on the ice is good. I think that they're going to take it slow and careful with him. My expectations are, does he play a game? And, I think everything else will sort of follow from there. And in general, the defense is struggling. No one's really standing out. Guys who have been sort of standouts like Helge Grans, Jordan Spence, not really making the same impression. TJ Tynan has 1 goal. I know that's not his job. His job is to distribute pucks, but, I feel like he hasn't been as noticeable as he has been in the past, just in terms of playmaking. The power play, obviously, he's a huge component of it, and just power play is not doing a whole lot of anything. And goaltending is bad. Matt Villalta is not good. Phoenix Copley started strong, but is struggling. And so even if everything else clicks, you can only outscore your problems so often, and they haven't been able to do that lately. So it's been a frustrating start for the Reign, because I think they're better than the results they're getting, but some of the mistakes that we're seeing, just don't really know how they're going to fix it.
So it's an interesting point at the end there, because I feel like if I would have told you that we're, 12 games, 13 games into the season, and Matthew Villalta had a .932 save percentage, you'd have been like, oh, so we're undefeated at the top of the Pacific Division.
Right. But no.
I mean, yeah, he's played basically 3 great games and 2 crappy ones.
Yeah.
But I looked at that, I was like, Matthew Villalta has a .932, not a .902, a .932. And that's...
Yeah. And that's kind of been the Matt Villalta story throughout his career. And also, the Ontario Reign in general, I don't know about this season, but past seasons, they usually lead the league or are pretty close in terms of shots allowed. So they don't help their goaltenders very much. And so Matt Villalta, and really any Reign goaltender, sometimes ends up with really good numbers because they're facing down 50 shots in a game. But Villalta's one of those guys who I feel like he has a really good game, and I'm like, oh, maybe I was wrong about him. And then the next game, I'm like, you just allowed the first 3 shots that you faced. What happened? He's very, very confusing.
At least this year, like I said, he's played 3 decent games and 2 crappy ones. So that's a better ratio than it's been in the past. I would take that as progress, but Copley is exactly who he is at this point in his career. Yeah. The fact that he's a .902 is that's Phoenix Copley. Yeah. Low 900s. Occasionally we'll give you a .931 game or whatever, but a lot of, low 900s, maybe a .909, .910, but that's the goalie he is. He's not a dominant number 1 anymore, and he hasn't been for quite a while. But all right. Any other closing thoughts on the division, the league as a whole, before we move on?
Why are there 10 teams in this division? It's ridiculous.
I'm assuming, especially because Colorado their NHL team is in the Central. And the distance between them and other Pacific Division teams versus Central teams is a negligible number.
Yeah.
But whatever. And it's not like does Colorado have a serious rivalry with anyone? I can't.
No, they exist.
Yeah, they're a team.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Start Bench Ship. As always, we have 3 prepared here. Sarah, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, Start Bench Ship. First one we're going to do, AHL Gripes. The expanded playoff, shootouts, and loser points. Sarah, kick us off.
We're going to start the expanded playoff, which I feel like is not what I thought I was going to say, but I'm starting it because so many people were annoyed by it. And I thought it added just an interesting level of chaos to the past year's playoffs that I want to see some more of it. I want to see what it can do. So I'm going to give it some more minutes this year. We'll bench the shootout. It's fun every so often, but it's mostly pointless. And we're shipping the loser point. The loser point can just go away. I'm tired of it.
Interesting. I am starting shootouts.
All right.
And I say this as an analyst, I hate shootouts. It's a random way to end a game. you might as well just, I mean, we used to call it last season the competitive coin flip, because that's what it is. It's a random coin flip of who wins this game. But not a single person when that game goes to a shootout leaves. They stay. They watch. Yeah. They're on the edge of their seats. Like, that's hockey is an entertainment product first and foremost. All sports are. Everything is entertainment. So you are ending the game in one of the most entertaining ways we realistically can. Is it random and silly? Yes. But guess what? People, like, it's entertaining and people will stay to watch it. It's high stakes and climactic, and it gives people a finite ending than a tie. I am not illegally allowed to ship both the playoff and loser points by the rules of this game. So we're going to bench the expanded playoff. Like, I think the expanding it to 5 teams or 6 teams in some cases is okay. The fact that the Pacific Division gets 7 teams is too many. Like, letting San Diego in and letting San Diego in last year when they were like the 27th worst or 27th place team in the AHL as the league is wrong. Like that, but that's a byproduct of having that many teams. Like, that number 7 team that gets in this year, whoever it is probably going to be like 20th or 23rd best or 28th best in the league, and better teams are going to have to sit on the outside where they get in. So, like, I understand what they're doing. I also understand the cash grab aspect of it, but like, that's a no for me. Loser points I'm doing my best not to have Stevie edit more censored in here, but like, loser points can suck it. Like, that is basically a way that coaches get to keep their job. Because look, I have more than a 500 point percentage, but you're still losing games. Like, dumb. Just, ugh. All right. On to the next one. We are going to go with mascots. AHL mascots. We have Ringo from the Texas Stars, Sully from the Cleveland Monsters, and Boomer from the Springfield Thunderbirds. I will go first here. I am going to start Ringo. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he is the back-to-back winner of the AHL's Mascot Madness, which is not necessarily a pointful thing, but I don't feel like if you've won twice in a row, like, I know he definitely won last year, or this most recent one. I think he won the one before that, but he definitely won most recently. And if you are getting your fan base to turn out for your mascot that hard, because it's just a straight online popularity contest, that says something to me about how you value your mascots. I've also seen him get a lot of love from Texas Stars fans. So I will spot him that one. Boomer, along the same lines. Like, you see a lot of love for him. He also, like, Springfield did a good job of making their mascots look like a child-friendly version of their logo. Whereas, like, the Texas Stars, you couldn't do that. So you had to do something else. But, like, Boomer perfectly encapsulates, like, what their logo looks like if kids were not scared of it. I am shipping Sully to I'm shipping him to the Belarus second. Like, I actually had to use the Wayback Machine to figure out why a seagull is the mascot of the Monsters. And there is no, like, real reason. It's just, when they were the Lake Erie Monsters, seagulls are by the lake and mascot. That is literally what the website said. Again, had to use the Wayback Machine to get that to pull up, because I literally could not find any other reason. This is he's a seagull. The Gulls have a seagull as their mascot. You are the Monsters. Your logo is a little fish thing that you very much could make a family-friendly, kid-friendly mascot out of, and you went with a seagull. No, bye.
This is cursed knowledge, and I kind of hate it now that I know this. I'm going in the same direction as you were for slightly different reasons. I'm starting Ringo purely on the basis of a couple years ago when, pre-COVID, whenever the AHL All-Star Game was out here in Ontario. I was there. I was walking around the concourse, and I came across Ringo surrounded by a bunch of small children. One of them had dropped their stuffed toy. I think it might have been a stuffed Ringo on the floor. And Ringo was, like, down on their knees, just, like, fake mourning this stuffed toy that had fallen. I'll have to tweet it. I will find the pictures that I took and tweet it because I was like, what is happening? This mascot went hard on like just on the floor, like wailing, soundlessly about this child having dropped this toy. So like Ringo has won this award back to back for good reasons because that mascot gets it. Benching Boomer, I have no particular feelings towards Boomer. It looks fun. If they made a stuffed Boomer, I'd probably buy it. It's like you said, it's a good kid-friendly representation of their logo. It's not a terrifying looking mascot. Looking at you, Rockford Ice Hogs. I think it's a solid mascot, and I'm okay with it. Sully, what the heck is that? I didn't even realize it was Cleveland's until I was like squinting at it, and then I went through the same thought process but they're the monsters. Why is their mascot not a monster? And then I got mad at it. So we're shipping that thing to like, you can go to like college. Just go be a college mascot. It's fine.
Especially too, like if it was like a Seattle's mascot is like a local lore
thing.
Play.
Yeah,
sure. Like I don't get it, but that's what I've been told. It's some local lore troll thing. Like is really believe that that's true. It's I don't know why. I don't. All right. Last but not least, this felt appropriate given the season that is upon us here. We're going for holidays. Sarah, kick us off.
All right. We are going to start New Year's. I preface this by saying that I have like zero feelings on any holidays whatsoever. So really, I just ship all of them, except for the fact that it gives me days off of work. But whatever. We're going to start New Year's. I feel like it's just always a fun one, usually because I am a nerd. I'm usually just sitting on my computer talking with my friends across 800 different time zones, or I'm at a hockey game because now they all play New Year's Eve games. It's just a fun one. It's a nice moment to spend like 35 seconds thinking about your past year and looking at how to go forward. I'll bench Thanksgiving. I don't really know why. I just will, mostly because I can't ship both of them. Like I'm shipping Christmas. I'm so like I was in an airport today and the airport just looked like Christmas threw up all over it, and it is November 16th. I have a former coworker who listens to Christmas songs in like July whenever she's stressed out. The appropriate time for me to listen to a Christmas song is like December 23rd. I'm just not a fan. Like the biggest thing that I'm a fan of is the fact that like the place that I work closes between Christmas and New Year's. So like I don't have anything to do for a week, but otherwise I'm over it. It makes it like, stop cutting fall short. Like fall's a nice fun time, and I have to think about winter now. I'm not ready. Go away.
I'm actually going to take the same order, but for very different reasons here. Let's start with the starts here. New Year's is a very fun holiday. My wife and I have a New Year's tradition that we are actually behind on. So in normal times, what we would do is we have this little jar that has a little label on the outside of it that says the year. And throughout the year, we just put little things in there of things that went well, throughout the year. Like more than just like I found $5 in my jeans pocket, but like, it doesn't have to be a life-altering event. Got a new job, moved to a new place, got a raise, something like that. Just good things that happened to you throughout the year. And then on New Year's, we open the jar and we read all of them out. And we think about all the good things that happened that year. And then we create a little man out of paper. I suppose it's not really gendered. It's a person out of paper. And we write on the back of it all the things that we wish would stay in the old year. These could be things like people saying YOLO, or, bad choices that you made, or, things in society, whatever. And then we light it on fire, because that's what the new year is. Good and bad. It's gone. It's over. It's done. And that is our New Year's tradition, and I love it. And, there's drinking and fun. But, we haven't got to do it for 2 years now, thanks, COVID. So we have we're going to have quite the bonfire to do. But that's why I love New Year's. Thanksgiving, I'm benching. I would co-start it, but the rules of the game are legally binding. So I'm benching Thanksgiving. I like Thanksgiving a lot. It's a fun kind of holiday where you just get together with your family and you make a bunch of food, and like Thanksgiving food is delicious. It's a silly holiday with a backstory that's completely made up, but so what? I think it's still a good time. I am shipping Christmas to the depths of hell. And I think a lot of my attitude towards disliking Christmas vehemently is that it's just expanding forever. Christmas music is enjoyable for like a week maximum.
Yes.
And it plays
Thank
for
you.
like 3 months. I cannot. Not to mention too, most people don't like Christmas. They just don't want to admit that they don't like Christmas. It's a lot of like, oh my God, what do I get for a gift for my friend's wife's secretary and stuff like that? Like people you have no business buying gifts for that you now have to stress to figure out, how do I gift them something for $25 that doesn't make me look like, you know, a random person giving them cash or a vacuum cleaner or whatever. Like, and it's nonsense. The actual holiday itself has become so over commercialized and overproduced and overdone that it's just silly. Not to mention, like, a good portion of people don't celebrate Christmas, like myself, and it's just like this is forced upon us. And everything about it is just bad. Like if it was literally Christmas was just celebrated from like December 20th through like New Year's Eve, I think all of us would be much happier. Like, yeah, I can tolerate Easter for a week, and Easter sucks. Like nothing is good about Easter. At least at Christmas, there are gifts and booze. Like, but if it's too long. All right, that's my welcome. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on holidays. All right, Sarah, take us out.
Well, that is it for the show. If you have complaints about our thoughts on Christmas, I direct them to the shadow realm. I don't want to hear them. That is it for us today. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. The Calder Farmstead is part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can listen to this and several other great hockey, sports, and sports entertainment programs, all at www.fullpresscoverage.com. Just click the podcast drop-down menu in the top right portion of the website and enjoy.
And if you guys are enjoying the Calder Farmstead, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. No sense hearing our thoughts about the holidays in June. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon, please rate and review the podcast. Or if you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment what you thought of the episode. Doing so helps others find the show, and your reviews help us improve it. We do read them and, try and take feedback as constructively as possible. You can also follow the show on social media at Calder Farmstead on Twitter, at the Calder Farmstead on Instagram and Facebook. Links to all of that and more can be found on our Linktree page, which is linktr.ee/thecalderfarmstead. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's AD_DYSFUNCTION. So he can make music for you too. Sarah, where can people find you?
Well, my name is Sarah Avampato. You can find me representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at Right Said Sarah. It's WRITE, said Sarah with an H. You can check out my writing at Full Press Hockey, where I talk about the Ontario Reign, or over at Canes Country, where I talk about the Chicago Wolves. Sean, where can folks find you?
I'm Sean O'Brien. You can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SEANOBRIE81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien_81. You can find all of my stats work. It is done. It is completed. It is up on the page for the 22-23 season at bit.ly/data-dump-and-chase. All lowercase, all one word. Thank you for tuning in for the show. For Sarah Avampato, I am Sean O'Brien, and I would ask you please kindly to dump and chase responsibly.